Hey, podcasters, welcome to the Sean Hare Show, where it's my job to help you learn how to look, feel, and live better. Because when you break it all down, you get rid of all the bells and whistles, and you cut through all the bullshit, it really does become so simple. A lot easier than you probably think it is right now. And helping me cut it all down today, break it all down, is Declan Doyle. Now, Declan was actually my tutor when I first became a personal trainer, when I was on my initial PT course over 6 years ago now. And I've done a lot of stuff since, and Dec's done a lot of stuff since. So we had a good catch up. We talked about loads of good little topics. And it's not just your typical eat more veg, walk more, all the simple stuff that you know you need to do. It's not just that. We touch on something really important, which is your environment and how your environment basically shapes you. And it either makes it easy for you to reach your goals or it makes it really hard. But the good thing is you can set up your environment to help you succeed. And that's what we talk about a lot in this episode. So settle down, get your headphones on, and enjoy the episode. Let's get into it.
Like you telling your brain, or let's be healthy this year in 2020 is not the best strategy. It's much more practical to start shaping the whole path, So yeah, I've been doing a lot of kind of research in, I suppose, the behavioral science aspect and how you bridge the coaching element along that, So it's been eye-opening, to say the least.
Okay, that sounds good. That makes sense. So obviously it's important because, like you say, if having a McDonald's around the corner, having food that you can just pick up in the house, in the shops around the corner, everything, and people like me and you, we talk about this stuff a lot, about what we call the obesogenic environment that we live in. Basically, it's not profitable for you to get slim. It's profitable for you to get fat. 100%. It's basically the way it seems. And so obviously what we're trying to do then.
That's such a good point you mentioned there. Like, it's not profitable. Like, you can, like, if you go back to evolution, like, the brain only cares about what is the biggest chunk of calories that I can get for the least amount of investment. And it's supposed to be like that, right? The only thing is that we are not an environment anymore that makes it hard. I suppose that makes it hard enough to get food quickly, whereas the brain really hasn't caught up with the environment yet we're in now, hence why it still runs the same way. So it's still operating off what can you do to get the least, or like the biggest chunk of calories for the least amount of investment. So all those things you mentioned, the McDonald's, the obesogenic environment, like, that is music to the brain's heart, if you like. You know what I mean? It's like, sure, that makes sense. I just I don't need to do anything. It's just on my doorstep, So it is a tough one, right? So it boils back to know is what is the practical steps that we can do more often to, like, reverse engineer that,
Yeah. And with all this stuff, it's something I've been thinking about recently. You know how, we have the whole kind of debate, the conversation of it's really hard to lose weight, but then it always seems even harder to keep it off. Like, that's the real challenge.
100%.
And this is why, because everything around us makes it hard to keep it off. It wants you to put it back on. Like I say, you've got all that food that's easily accessible. You've got fizzy drinks, like drinkable calories and everything else. You've got your car, so you don't have to walk. You've got your escalator, so you don't have to walk up the stairs. And all that stuff just makes it hard. It is hard to stay in shape. That's why it takes so much effort. But like I was saying, if you set up the environment, that means it requires less effort.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I put it. Like, spend time and just moving a few things around so that you almost shape your own decision making, And the more practical we get, I think it'll lead to a whole host of outcomes in the future. But it's obviously going to take time,
Yeah. So what are some of the sort of the key, or I guess like the most common things, maybe like the starting points that you tend to give people when it comes to optimizing their environment, if you like?
Yeah. One of the early things I make people do is, like, write down what they spend most of their time on first, like what's actually eating into their time, because if you don't make time for it, this stuff doesn't work, right? So, I mean, I really like the practical stuff of people writing down a list of things that they feel are a pain in the ass. Do you know what I mean? Like emails, shopping, you know, driving around, gym. It could be trips there, trips everywhere, and just writing down, well, what is actually reducing your time first, and is there anything we can optimize there? So, for example, like if you felt that food planning is a bit of a pain, right? You have to go there, think of meals to cook. Like, how can we optimize it? Like, well, lots of food places now and lots of supermarkets will do online shopping, right? So that's where that's just an option where if you find yourself falling into the same old habits where that you come home, there's nothing in the fridge, nothing to really cook, well, I just order pizza. Well, that's probably down to there's not a plan ahead, right? So can you prepare a list of foods, send that to your online shopping, get the same list of foods, delivered to your door? So that's me an example, making the environment work for you rather than against you, you know? And that process takes away the decision making of, you know, I come home, I'm tired and cognitively fatigued from all the emails I sent in work. And the easiest thing my brain wants is to throw something in the microwave for 3 minutes, you know? So time is number one, like people trying to optimize where those little snippets are. And then like start with your lowest hanging fruit then, right? So start with stuff that if you tweak now will probably give you the biggest amount of reward, right? So for example, if someone's having a couple of drinks every night, right? Beer, wine, alcohol, can you reduce it a little bit? Can you drop it to 3 to 2 beers, or a bottle of wine to half a bottle of wine? Like, you know what I mean? So it's always starting with the lowest hanging fruit, and then we just take it from there. We build habits on current behaviors and take it from there. So yeah, real practical stuff, like what's practical to that person, what's practical to where they are now. And yeah, that's me as a coach then. I'm just trying and gauge where the individual is at now and just set those steps up for them.
Yeah. I like what you said about the online shopping and getting it delivered to your door, because that's one of those things I would usually point out in terms of the obesogenic environment of saying, oh, you don't even have to walk to go and get your food anymore. But obviously, the way you've looked at it there, you've turned that on its head to make the fact that, all right, maybe you don't have to walk to get it, but that can then benefit in another way, because it means it takes less effort. So you get more out of it if you do it right.
Exactly. And again, like the key word here, I suppose, is context, right? It just depends on the context of the individual. If they're kind of that type of person, then if a person told me, well, do you know what, I'm not really up for that online shopping stuff because I find myself, I'm ordering, you know, X, Y, and Z when I go online, I'll order a bunch of crap, then that's probably not the best strategy for that person right now. You know, but I'm kind of always trying to tease out. It's basically, the way I look at it is like reducing the amount of decisions your brain has to make to the point where it's easy for it to say, yeah, this is easy, this is a healthier option, let's start with that, you know. So I mean, like the behavioral science aspect is really about, I think, reducing cognitive fatigue to the point where the healthier option becomes the default option almost, you know. Yeah.
I like that idea of reducing the decisions, because that's the hard part, isn't it?
We've so many to make now, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's just bloody hell. You got 50 apps on your phone, you got 500 emails in your inbox, you got 400 people who want, you know what I mean? So it's all decision making, and the more we have to make, the more like cognitive load we increase on ourselves. Then all the research points to the less willpower we'll have to make healthier, you know, decisions over time. So I'm a big advocate of that.
Yeah. That word willpower is a big one in it. People always say, "Oh my God, I've got no willpower. How do I get more willpower?" what do you say to people when they ask you like, "Oh, I just got no willpower, Deck. What am I supposed to do?"
Yeah. Willpower is a bit of a myth, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're 100% right. Like people think it's this on and off switch of, some people are more, they've just got more willpower than me. But there's a trade-off, right, between the capability someone has and uh, the like motivation someone has. So, for example,
Mm.
if someone feels like they don't have the capability of doing something, they probably won't, which means the willpower is no decreased. So if someone's scared of going to the gym because it's like they think people will judge them almost, well, the willpower is obviously going to be less than someone who feels like they can go to the gym and train, right?
Yeah.
So the way I look at it is not look at not look at it from a willpower angle, but look at it from an angle of how can we make it easy for that person where they feel empowered.
Hmm.
So if they can go to the gym, well, can they walk? Well, can they walk around the block? Does that? Because that's the practical stuff that's going to build willpower in the long run, you know.
Yeah.
So and you're I mean you're 100% right. Like it's such a myth because we haven't got an awful lot of it to go around, and
Yeah.
when you're making decisions to get you through the day, emails, replies, responses, like willpower is going to dwindle quite quick. So you shouldn't keep that as your number one strategy once you get home at 5 o'clock in the evening and thinking that you can turn on the switch to eat well or go to the gym. Like it's much more practical to as we've been saying is shape that environment up first, and you'll find that willpower follows along mindlessly. So yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one, willpower with people for sure.
Yeah. It's always funny, willpower, because it always reminds me of a course I did with someone where he was talking about willpower, and he basically said, if you're relying on willpower, you're basically just trying to force yourself to do something you don't want to do.
It's a good point. Yeah, yeah, it's a
Like
really
I
good point.
said, it's not because there's not a lot of it to go around because you just you're just willing yourself through it.
Yeah,
Not like you want to do it then. Like you're trying to make yourself do it. In
yeah,
which case, like you said, that's when that capability comes in. If you don't really want to do it,
yeah.
probably not going to end up doing it.
That's a good point. And that's where the habit angle comes in, right? Because like if you start to do something new and you're just solely thinking, I'm gonna just rely on my willpower here, like you are trying to get the brain to kind of go to a place that one, it hasn't ever approached before, but two, you're you're kind of asking the brain to make like 10 or 12 new decisions that it wasn't used to. So for example,
Mm.
if someone wants to join the gym in the new year, right, and they're solely relying on willpower, joining the gym sounds good. I'll join the gym, it's just across, or it's just in the city, or I just pay my membership and it's and I'll just go, right? But what people don't think about is, to join a gym, decision making to actually make that a habit, you have to think about travel to the gym back now.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about maybe who's going to pick up the school or who's going to pick up the kids on the school run now, right? Because you're going to the gym or you're going home. You've got to think about clothing, right? So I've got to change my clothes. Do I change them in work? Do I change them after work? I've got to have a shower. So straight away, the brain starts to add this stuff up and go, well, you have to make this decision, that decision, this decision. And quite quick, willpower starts to dwindle, right? So the brain
Yeah.
starts to think, you know what? It was a lot easier being the old you when we just got in the car and drove straight home, because that required no willpower and I knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
So it's one that you're right. You shouldn't will yourself to do it, because that's a pure sign that it's not going to last that long.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a very good strategy.
Yeah, but that's when it links back exactly what you were saying there, links straight back to how we started on talking about the the environment
Hmm.
and setting it up.
Yeah,
Because where you say you got to think about who picks up the kids, when do I do this, have I got enough time to get a shower, have I got enough time to get changed, and all that. That just loops straight back to what you said of see where your time is first,
Mm-hmm.
and let's optimize that, because that's
Yeah.
one of those things you're going to have to put in. If you want to go to the gym, where are you going to put it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like, and what sort of things would need to be tweaked consistently, right, to make that an actual change, and that's the tricky part. And that is the same old thing that people are going to go start thinking about right now, coming into 2020, is like willing themselves on, and it's a shame, right? Because the research is clear that like 75-80% of people by March will have failed, So
On the
and
resolutions.
exactly. So it'll be down to not willpower solely. It'll be down that it's just not practical for where they are right now,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where we are now, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's it. It's not that you didn't want to make
Yeah,
the
exactly.
change of the resolution. It's not that you didn't try hard enough or any of that. It's just you just didn't think it through.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't think it through. You didn't let it all play out and actually have a plan to go, well, what's practical, number one, but what can I stay consistent at that doesn't require me beating myself up and turning on this button in the evening to kind of attend the gym or early in the morning,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. It's always the habits and the finding the time and making the
Yeah,
time, isn't it?
absolutely.
I'm interested to know if still on the environment thing, just for one
Mm-hmm.
more little bit. You're talking about obviously as a coach, just teasing things out from clients and finding, what is their lowest hanging fruit, what's the thing that's going to optimize for them individually. Is there anything that kind of springs to mind that turned out to be like a lowest hanging fruit for someone that made a massive change and you were like, I did not expect that?
It's a good point. Um, I think there's not any one thing I can pick because most clients will have their lowest hanging fruit, right?
Yeah.
They're kind of over consuming at the weekends, or they're having stress is a big one. But I mean, there's been one or two where, believe it or not, the financial side has made an impact, right? So, for example, like when you dig deep in someone and you notice that, they're kind of focusing on areas of their life that's consuming a lot of time, and then
Yeah.
when you dig deep on the focus, you find out they're actually invested in these areas, right? So, I had a client. It was early on in my coaching career, actually. Might have been 9 or 10 years ago. But long story short, but she was one of those clients who was signed up to everything, like shoe catalogs, and she's paying into these apps that were costing her £6 or £7 a month. And we dig deep into this, like she was basically, and where one of these clients who's got like Netflix and he's got 800 channels on her TV and she only watches 3,
Yeah.
type of thing. So there's been one or two like that where when you dig deep, you find out that one, the financial strain is a kind of a cognitive block, where like they're constantly, I suppose, stressed over, this is always hanging over me every month that I've invested in these things. And half of this stuff she didn't even know that she was doing, right? Until we
Right.
dug deep into bank statements and stuff. And I was thinking, you probably take a look at what's costing you, And this kind of stuff I suppose we kind of fell into it. Like, it's kind of not something I would normally go into as a coach of health and fitness to talk about
Yeah.
the finance stuff, but it just got into it, when you're chatting to clients and when it came down to it, like when she was adding all this stuff up, like it was costing her a hell of a lot of money and it was not giving her a lot of feedback. You know what I mean? Like just paying into stuff for the sake of paying into stuff. So when she dug deep in it, basically, I was like, ask a simple question, the 80-20 type of stuff, right? Saying like, tell me some of this stuff that you actually use, that you're getting some, investment in health from, like, and 95% of it, like she couldn't name. She was like, doesn't really matter if I have it or not. You know what I mean? So when she cut all that stuff out and started to look for ways in her life where she was like, do I really need this? Do I really need this? Or is it a want?
Yeah.
We've got needs and we've got wants. And it was just eye-opening to her. Like, she's like, couldn't believe that I was spending, this amount of money on stuff that bloody didn't matter all that much.
Yeah.
And I suppose I suppose it's the right time to talk about this stuff because this Black Friday is coming up now, right?
Yeah.
It's just that stuff. You're going to see it every year. Just people invest and sign up to kind of things they don't need, but they're just socially swayed and they don't realize that investment, 9 times out of 10 is just worthless in my opinion,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was I've had kind of one or two clients like that over the years.
Yeah. That's an awesome example of one of the typical barriers, isn't it? One of the most common barriers that people say of why they can't eat healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's too expensive.
Yeah.
That's what so many people say. But what you've just said there is what else is expensive?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
if you've got Netflix, which is say $7.99 or $8.99 a
Yeah.
month, and you've got, I don't know, subscription to something else, which is like 15 quid a month,
Yeah.
that stuff adds up.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, if you were to cut that out, if you were to cut out your Starbucks every other day or
Absolutely.
every day, whatever it might be, you'd have so much more money to invest in yourself.
100%.
And like you said, you then got to weigh up that list of, right, do I want Starbucks? Do I want Netflix? Or
Yeah.
do I need it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Do I want
it's
to be
tough.
healthy or do I need to be? If you
Exactly.
compare it that way, some of those answers would probably be quite easy.
I think so, and that's exactly how I'd like prep it to a client is like, are these needs or are these wants? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Could you get on okay without them? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is easy for them to make.
Yeah. Awesome. So we'll move on a little bit then from the environment, but only slightly because we're basically just going to look at a different environment.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned before your corporate work you've been doing, the lectures, the talks, all around workplace well-being, workplace wellness, whatever that particular company wants to call it.
Yeah.
So what have you been doing in that area then?
Yeah. So I do some consultancy stuff for a company called Health at Work. So basically, yeah. So we help all organizations of all shapes and sizes, I suppose, with their health and well-being strategies. Which is kind of, I suppose, well-being is new enough to the corporate sector. I think it's not kind of 50 years old, So I think we're new in the era of it, and I think corporate health is going to have a big role to play in the next, 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
So it's all about kind of supporting organizations of what way they can tie in well-being to the bottom line, right? So like, what can they practically provide staff with support-wise to help them build a strong culture of well-being, right? Because one thing's for sure, and this is something I say to most organizations, even when I'm kind of up in front speaking to people, is we are not going to solve the health crisis that we have now by putting more hospitals out there, you know what I mean? Putting more GPs, training up more nurses. I mean, that clearly hasn't worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one, we can't keep up with the pace anyway of sickness out there. So we need other areas to chime in, right? So we need the home place to chime in. We obviously need the workplace, and obviously the two places you spend most are your home and work. So the workplace has a big role to play, and I'm kind of out there, I suppose, if you like, is kind of supporting organizations of how they can actually, again, shape that environment to make it more practical for people to kind of live well, So that is the next challenge I think we have on our hands, and that's something I'm keen on now, is making sure that, lots of workplaces just have the right strategies in place to do so.
Yeah. And so is that things like, obviously, I guess in like your cafeteria, your canteen, whatever, having better options, I guess would be like first and foremost usually?
I mean, that is part of it, yeah. I mean, but that would only be, I suppose, a strand of it, right? Because first of all, something that we do early is really get people around the table, like the CEOs, the HR, the senior leadership, the employees, and actually quantify what does this well-being stuff mean to you guys? Like, what's the vision here? Like, why do you want a well-being strategy? what impact will it make on employees? What impact will it make on the business level? So you really got to quantify first what, I suppose, well-being means, because what well-being means to one person mightn't be the same, So that's one of the kind of early things we do. And then we kind of ask them to kind of come up with a strategy or come up with some type of statement as to what would well-being look like if we achieved our goals in the next 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So how would the organization look? How would it feel? How would people feel in it? And that's when you can kind of dig a little deeper as to where you want to go with your strategy then. And again, you can put in all that stuff as well, the nutrition stuff, the canteen, and getting the environment ticking over. But none of that is going to get any headway unless people know what well-being means. Why are we doing this? Why are we putting new policies in place? Why are we changing the healthy options or the kind of, I suppose, the unhealthy options to healthy options now? You know what I mean? So that works for sure, but it's only going to work consistently if you've got that statement early of what well-being means to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of things do organizations come up with from that?
Yeah, I mean, most of our work is on the strategy side now. Is like, because I suppose because well-being is new, those usually who've been tasked with the role in the organization to put a well-being strategy in, right, are those that usually don't have the formal qualifications to do so. So it's usually HR or the CEO. So, I mean, it's tough for those people because if they don't know behavioral science, if they don't know how the environment works or shapes behavior or habits work or nutrition, it's a hard slog for those people, right? So it's tough for them to kind of make a real impact if they don't have the strategies to do so. So we're mostly helping those people become the well-being champions in their own organizations, if you like, and starting to collect feedback, focus group surveys and seeing what staff want, what kind of stuff could be practical for the organization. So we spend a lot of time, if I'm totally honest here, doing the foundation stuff, and then we see where the strategy goes a year or two, So that's kind of that's what we do quite early with an organization these days.
Yeah. And in those kind of talks and seminars I've been seeing you do posts of, is that to like the employees? Are they to the CEOs, the HR? What's that?
Yeah, they're kind of a wide verse. I mean, some of them are just they're kind of I suppose health events I've been invited to speak at, but some will be to employees only, right? And it could be an ad hoc day where a business invites me in to have a chat about nutrition in the workplace or eating habits, and I'll just do an hour on that. I mean, all that stuff is great, right? It's the stuff that where I'm speaking for an hour, but none of that stuff is kind of, I mean, that kind of opens the door, if you like.
Yeah.
What really is going to change an organization's well-being culture is committed leadership from the top down. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I suppose I'm more passionate about getting leaders in touch with what a culture of well-being actually should be. Yeah. Because I can't change eating habits by speaking for an hour. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to, by doing health screenings for 50 staff, that's not going to change the well-being culture. It's going to come from the people in that culture, So that's where I think there's room to improve, in places.
Yeah. So those talks then to the employees can probably, like you say, open the door for some people, switch on some of the lights, but then it's the staff trying to run the program who have then got to take their hand and walk them down the path to be like, look, this can be better. You can feel better in work.
Exactly. You're 100% right. And that's not easy, right? To get people into that mindset sometimes. It's not easy to go, well, look, this health stuff can really make a difference here. But it's going to take, consistent effort. And it's the same old story, isn't it? It's consistency and adherence yields the best return on investment. So that's the work bit, the workplace well-being bit that needs to be stayed, So I think it's going to be a hard slog. I think for kind of workplaces to think about that long term, but I think they're certainly going to be worth it. In the long run, anyway, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, the home and work is where you spend most of your time. If you're not asleep, which is 8 hours of your day, you're going to be at work, which is another 8 hours of your day,
Yeah,
not more. So
crazy, isn't it? Like, I suppose the stats on that are like 48% or something. It works out time. Like, you spend most of your time in work, so that's only half your life.
yeah,
So you've got like half your life in a place that can absolutely shape you, habit-wise, stress-wise, culture-wise. So of course you're going to spend work time in that environment, you know. So and that's where we are now, I think, in the UK and, you know, across the world, as well as the workplace has a massive role to play, I think, now from here on in.
yeah. I think it sounds good. Seeing where that goes.
Yeah,
Like I said, it is obviously really important. Okay, so the last thing you mentioned before probably was like your one-to-one coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been doing that, I'm guessing, since before I started, when you were initially training me, and then you're still doing that now?
I absolutely am, yeah. Not tons of clients, but I still like to keep a handful of people. I suppose I just like still coaching, you know. I still like it,
Yeah.
solving more stuff or helping to solve more stuff. So I think I'll always do some bit of it to an extent, but not to the extent as I was, you know.
Yeah. Actually, one other thing that I wanted to ask that I noticed one post from you the other day that hopefully we won't go down too much of a rabbit hole on was the Game Changers so-called documentary on Netflix that came out.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts there?
Number one, I haven't seen it, right? I just put that out there. I haven't even seen it because I value my time.
Yeah.
So that is not the best optimized time for me. But look, like I've read the data and I've listened to stuff that was said in the movie, and I've seen clips and stuff that are floating around.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, it's you don't have to stretch the mind too far to kind of come up with your own opinion. Like, you know, the way I see it is, you know, when people people ask me about it, like, first of all, I go, let's think about this rationally. Like, if this was an experiment, right? You've got one person in the main character who's kind of drilling home a vegan diet, right? So that's one. Null equals one, right? So if this was an experiment, would you base, you know, one person's opinion on the approach they've used for health to base the rest of the world opinion, right?
Yeah.
To go that way. So that's the way I'll just think. I'll get people, first of all, just open up their eyes to what came out of that, you know, and then that hopefully gets people open to and again, I'm not one for entertaining. There's a quote someone told me years ago. I think it was actually professor when I was in uni. He said, listen, there was no point debating the undebatable. So when I speak to someone on something, a topic, if I notice straight away they're not even open to a rational debate about something, then I'll just, you know what I mean? I'm not even going to go there, you know, so there's no point.
Yeah.
So if you think about it that way, one guy, and I'm sure you've read all the data of the interest of those who've made the movie had in. So that's another confirmation of like bias, if you like. You know, that's one where it's hard to trust everything.
Yeah.
And then the fact the movie's called The Game Changers, right? Like, I'm sure that was there was a lot of thought went into, I suppose, of let's call it something that can be quite controversial.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but yeah, I mean, if there was one thing that came out of this year to showcase that why science is important, I think that's the movie. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah. I think the main thing from what you've said there to take from it for anyone listening is when someone tells you something and they seem really convincing, it doesn't matter how convincing it is, just ask your own questions. You know, do your own research. because
100%.
there's a lot of stuff in it. I did watch it because I knew a lot of people would ask questions. Um, and there's a lot of stuff where even when I was watching it, I was like, oh, that's really interesting actually. But then when I stopped and thought about it afterwards, you realize, oh, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm,
It's just because of the way it's presented and kind of
absolutely. Of
sleight of hand in the way they do things and stuff.
course. Yeah, yeah.
And then that's the same for anything, whether it's a documentary you've watched on Netflix or Sandra in work telling you about the new latest magic thing she's done to lose weight. Just ask more
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's key, right? Like the first part of research is just ask questions.
Yeah.
And that's something I think we're probably not asked to do a lot of. Usually these days we just follow along to what's in front of us. But yeah, there's certainly more room for people to be asking more questions. But yeah, I'm sure it'll get loads of headlines and sell loads of stuff for a while, and then it'll just fizzle out like the rest of them.
Yeah. So big lesson there, be skeptical.
Yes, absolutely. Always be skeptical. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I think we'll probably start wrapping up there. And so to do that, we've had loads of things in there about the environment, about changing your habits, the way you think and everything. And so not necessarily to wrap it up, but because there's so much and we want to kind of cut through it and give people something to go away with, can you give the listeners one thing that you think would be a good thing to go away and take action on to make a positive step as soon as they put the headphones down off this podcast?
I suppose just what I think has helped me more than anything, may might help other people, it may not, but I think read at least one chapter a day on a topic that you feel if you know more about, it will allow you to make more of an informed decision, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the more we do that, then the less we'll spend time on stuff that really doesn't matter all that much,
Yeah.
right? So if people knew the ins and outs of what a vegan diet was, let's say we're just talking about that, I mean, we wouldn't even be talking about it. You know what I mean? We'd be just there'd be no push on it, there'd be no controversy on it.
Mm-hmm.
It would be people would be able to come to their own rational decision quite quick. So yeah, read one chapter a day. That's my go-to.
Yeah, I like it. I love it. Really good. All right, cool. So finish it off. Obviously, if anyone wants to get in touch with you or get a message to you, find out a bit more for themselves, how can they do that?
Yes, so probably the best place is go to my website, theprocoachinggroup.com. It's actually down at the moment, but it'll be up towards the end of the week. It's just having a bit of a revamp. And I'm on Facebook, on Instagram at ProCoachDeck as well. So yeah, feel free, pop your questions over or follow along mindlessly like the rest of us.
Awesome. Well, that website link, this will go out in about a week's time anyway. So it'll probably be up by the time people are listening. So click the link anyway. I'll put all the links in the show notes in the description. But apart from that, thanks for getting on the podcast deck. We tried once and we didn't manage to do it because the internet broke, but we got all the way through this time. So yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Cheers, Sean. Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
So what did you think of all that environment talk? Does it kind of make sense? Because it's one of the topics that I actually love and I've wanted to talk about for a while, but because I've seen Deck talking about it so much on his Instagram, I wanted to wait until I could get Deck on the podcast to properly go through it. So if it all makes sense, start changing your environment. Think about how you can set things up to help you succeed. Like Deck said, a good place to start is with your time. What do you spend your time doing? Once you know that, you can start to make a plan and put things in place so that decisions become habits. And before we wrap up, I've got one last question for you. Would you like to receive a couple of emails from me throughout the week? Obviously, all intended, just like this podcast is, to help you learn how to look, feel, and live better. Sometimes those emails will just be a quick one to let you know there's a new podcast episode. Sometimes it'll be a new HIIT workout video that I've put on YouTube. Sometimes it'll be a recipe, and sometimes it might be something that I've put on social media that people are really engaging with, really responding to, finding useful, and I want to make sure you don't miss out on it, so it comes to you in an email. If that sounds like something that'd help you out, that you do want to receive, click the link for it in the description for this episode. It's bit.ly/shmindnewsletter, so look out for that link. You got to make sure you get the right capital letters in there. Anyway, that's this week's episode. And just to remind you, in future episodes coming up, what I'm going to be doing is some Q&A episodes where I'll take questions from you guys on whatever it is you've got questions on. Obviously, ideally around how to look, feel, and live better. Whether it's your nutrition, your exercise, the mindset side of things, something on the environment like we talked about today, send me your questions, and in those podcasts, every few episodes, I'll give you the answers. Send me an email with all of that at info@seanhare.co.uk with the subject line podcast. And that's everything. If you've been watching this on Facebook, please do me a favor, click the like button, share it with your friends, leave us a comment. If you're watching it on YouTube, again, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment again, because all those things help to put it into people's news feeds so I reach more people, so I can help them look, feel, and live better too. And of course, if you're listening on the podcast, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, whether it's on iTunes or Stitcher, Spotify, or whatever you listen on. Thanks for listening to this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.